Don't worry, we are friends.
GM friends, and welcome back to another episode on Frens Validator. If this is your first video, I'm your host Juri Maibaum, and this shows a hub that brings together crypto pioneers, exciting projects, and a thriving community. We at Frens Validator are a core contributor to the staking sector and believe that it will grow into a multi-billion-dollar industry over the next couple of years. On the show, you will learn how to profit from the proof of stake run-up, how to make passive income in crypto with staking, and how to stay ahead of the curve. If this sounds interesting to you and you want to profit from the staking revolution, subscribe to this show. And today I'm super thrilled to welcome Amadeo Brands from YieldNest to the show. YieldNest is at the forefront of restaking, simplifying access to high-yield, risk-adjusted DeFi strategies with liquid restaked tokens. And today we are going to talk about exciting yield opportunities to eventually double your yield on your ETH. And we are going to pick Amadeo's brain on restaking generally, brainstorm a bit around Ethereum's roadmap, and so much more. With that being said, Amadeo, welcome to the show. Good to have you on.
Hello there, and thank you for having me, Juri. It's a pleasure. We go way back. We actually talked to each other all the way back, I think 2018 or 19. It's been a long time, so I'm very happy to be back on the show and catch up and see what's going on.
Yeah, let's get into this in a second or two. But before that, you mentioned it's not your first time on the show. You've been here 2 times already in 2019 and in 2020. Back then, DeFi itself was new. We talked about the money Legos and these things. So now DeFi has come a long way. But for everyone who is listening to the show for the first time or people who don't know you yet, could you please give us like kind of a super quick rundown of your background? Again, you have been in the DeFi trenches for a very long time now. So yeah, let's talk about this and then reflect a little bit on YieldNest afterwards.
Sounds amazing. Yes, I'm Amadeo Brands. I'm Dutch from origin, currently in beautiful Thailand. I have a background in software engineering and economics. So crypto for me was like the perfect match. I got into crypto in 2012 while I was still like a full-time software engineer in the Netherlands. And then started full-time in 2015 and was basically working for, at the time, crypto hedge fund. So I worked for a big crypto hedge fund in the Netherlands. And later I had another hedge fund, DeFi Capital. And in between, I always kind of worked for different products. I worked with MakerDAO. I worked with Curve Finance. I worked with a big plethora of other like kind of DeFi protocols, always kind of a little bit in the background and on the research side, on like and basically working for family offices and things like that, and making the transition in between also a lot of education. So I did on Ivan on Tech, I gave DeFi 101 in 2019. So this was even before, this was when DeFi was like $200 or $300 million market cap on DeFi Llama. You could see really little charts. And I actually remember I was giving my first course about decentralized finance. And then we crossed the 100 million cap. And that was like a really exciting time of like, hey, this is actually getting real. We're doing CDPs and lending and borrowing markets, started a little bit, right? This was very exciting. And now we're many years further and there's still a lot of work to be done, but we came a long way. Very happy and proud of our industry. Yeah.
Yeah, very well said. I actually mentioned it to you when we met in Thailand last year that I was one of the participants of that course, also catch the uni airdrop because of that. So yeah, these were like the golden DeFi times, I would say, the golden DeFi summer, where we cheered about 100 million TVL, which is like something so casual these days. They're like protocols that have far beyond $100 million in TVL. So yeah, crazy how times flies. And now let's talk about this actually, because YieldNest is one of these protocols that drive the DeFi ecosystem. And are part of a sector that drove the entire innovation a bit further, which is restaking. So for those of the people who are new to YieldNest and new to restaking, let's start a little bit at the beginning to make sure that everyone is on one page. So could you give us like a high-level overview of what YieldNest is all about? I mean, sure, as mentioned in the intro, you are a restaking protocol allowing you to restake your ETH and earn higher rewards. But let's break it down in simple terms and discuss the broad protocol architecture here. So where's YieldNest deployed? Is it a protocol in Ethereum or is it an AVS? What advantages do users have on YieldNest compared to users who restake natively via EigenLayer, for example? So yeah, let's just get everyone on one page here.
Yeah, I think the most simple way to understand that, and also the differentiator between things like an EtherFi or Renzo or other bigger like restaking protocols, is that YieldNest is a restaking protocol that offers simple, high-yielding products in a risk-adjusted way that rebalance between restaking protocols and DeFi protocols. And actually, I would better say rebalance between a variation of DeFi protocols, including restaking protocols, because I see restaking as just an extension of what decentralized financial products have to offer, right? And how do we do that? Well, we actually have 4 derivatives. We have YNETH max, we have YNBTC max, YNUSD max, and YNBNB max. And how that works is if you are a user, you want to earn a yield on your ETH, for example, then what you do, you can go to YieldNest, you can inject your ETH or actually any asset in the future. It will be automatically swapped for YNETH max, which is gives you a high risk-adjusted return. This token will kind of take care of all the dirty DeFi work that we have to do nowadays. You know, like as I said in the beginning, DeFi has come a long way, but unfortunately, I do feel that we did 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards, and 2 steps forward, 1 backwards. But for good reasons, in my opinion. And the whole layer 2 and layer 1 and the whole kind of shifting, and like one of DeFi was this $100 million market cap, but now exploded and ballooned to almost like $200 billion. That's not, that's a lot of new volume, new users, new things, a lot of performance issues and security issues. So in order for us to kind of combat that, what YieldNest does, if you look at, for example, the YNETH Max product, it's a vault that settles on ETH layer 1 and then automatically goes into different yield opportunities like restaking. So we restake on EigenLayer, Symbiotic, Karak, Kernel, and we kind of go to these layers and see, okay, where can we inject this capital to get the maximum amount of yield in the most risk-adjusted way. The first step is restaking, because that's like pretty low risk at the moment. We know exactly where to go to get like that 1 or 2% extra. But then we go even a step further. We then also, in that same kind of DeFi, like YNETH Max, in this DeFi protocol, this DeFi token, this DeFi vault, we also will go to different DeFi opportunities like a liquidity pool, lending and borrowing, and we can talk about later more of that, or restaking of loans, for example, right? Because the term restaking is a little bit hijacked by the platforms like EigenLayer and Symbiotic, but what it actually means, in my opinion, is just the rehypothecation of asset, or making asset more capital efficient. Yeah. And then when you as a user, you just hold 1 token, and then underneath, as a protocol, will automatically go towards all these high yielding opportunities. So for example, it would rebalance between Aave and Euler. It would rebalance between Curve and Velodrome, Aerodrome. So it will, in the beginning, it's only going to do ETH L1 and BNB L1 strategies, because the vaults and the tokens, the accounting of these tokens is settling on ETH layer 1 for the highest amount of security. The underlying strategies can actually go anywhere. We could even see a future where the YNETH Max would go on ETH L1, but also on Base on BNB chain, and even maybe on Sui or Solana or other opportunities where assets could flow in a ideally permissionless manner, right? And we do this because we use the latest tooling and the latest innovations like co-processors. We're using AI agents, so we have a whole agentic framework. We're launching our own kind of AI agent that always finds the best routes for us and injects that to the kind of the strategies. And we also use Hypernative to always monitor all these different strategies to see if anything would go wrong, to alert, and then to eject to the top level vault, right? So, and then it is on ETH layer 1 with the highest like economic security, or BNB layer 1, or whatever asset we build. The main source of that asset, that's where we're going to build. So ETH, we have Y and ETH Max, obviously that settles to ETH layer 1. We have Y and BNB Max that settles to BNB layer 1 for just the maximum amount of security. Yeah.
That's super interesting. And I also loved how you talked about reshaping the term restaking a bit. But yeah, before we get into the trenches, and I believe there are so many interesting ways in order to optimize your yield via YieldNest, let's once again talk a little bit about the architectural term of restaking that you mentioned. It got hijacked by Eigenlayer and Symbiotic a bit, and really basically shaped the understanding of restaking for most of us in the industry. So again, you have been, especially in the Ethereum community, for a very long time. So really just off topic, super interested in picking your brain on this. How do you basically see restaking contributing to the Ethereum roadmap from a broader perspective? In your opinion, is it just a use case for people to earn a higher yield in order to potentially power a few applications? But the actual on-chain activity that drives the growth of the Ethereum ecosystem at the end of the day would take place on layer 2s or on the Ethereum layer 1? Or do you actually see restaking becoming a super critical, especially technical component of Ethereum's future?
Yeah, that's a great question, Juri. Thank you. I think that restaking could basically do to decentralized finance what the mortgage-backed security market kind of did to the credit markets, right? And that went wrong in the centralized financial world, but it went wrong only like 20, 30 years after these mortgage bonds and package things actually came to the market, right? The reason for that was intransparency. So it's important to understand that restaking has a lot to do with the mortgage-backed security market. I will try to make it a little bit more simple. In restaking, you have basically two different types of security. You have network security and you have economic security, right? So protocols like Eigenlayer focus a lot on the network security side. EigenDA, single slot finality, CK proof systems, co-processors, those kind of things are network security. But how I actually see it is that the second part, economic security, that's where the real money can be made, right? That's also where, because if you talk about network security, that's data availability layers. That's still in that crypto economic kind of circle. If we talk about economic security, we could make the case for example, insurance claims on chain and other things, right? So restaking is much broader than just network security. You can do economic security. You can have instant dispute resolutions, for example, where let's say, Juri, we make an agreement with each other. We're saying like, well, I believe the weather is going to be 30 degrees tomorrow. You agree or disagree, and then we can use instead of an escrow, we can use a like kind of restakers that stake on this bet, and if what the outcome is, you could slash the other side that's wrong, and then I will take money, right? Or you will take the money, depending on how the weather will move. So I think it's a much bigger thing, right? What we can do with this kind of reusing of on-chain economic security. So basically, What does that mean? On-chain economic security. It's basically security and money that we can instantly move around, right? In traditional finance, if you have contract agreements, insurances, or anything like that, as everybody knows, like if you have an insurance policy, in order to, if something happens to you, you always will have to either front the money yourself, or you will have to go to a bunch of paper forms and things like that. With restaking, we could make the data inputs with, also with IoT or I forgot the name of that, but there's a whole industry, right? Like with real world data and on-chain data, we can mix things and we can instantly settle certain disputes with one another. Especially if everything happens on-chain, it's very easy. But even with off-chain signals, we could instantly settle certain economic debates or agreements. And I think that's what restaking could be, and it's much broader. And I think actually also the term restaking, maybe a better term would just be capital efficiency, or using rehypothecation. These words are a little bit bad. So restaking is maybe this newer term that we use for it, right? But it all comes down to reusing money that you already put somewhere else and reusing that security in other ways, right? So let's say you have Lido staked ETH, so staked ETH from Lido, that actually secures the Ethereum network. You can actually restake that staked ETH and put it into YieldNest, and YieldNest will maybe underpin certain AVSs on Eigenlayer, right? And then we're reusing that security, right? But it doesn't stop there. What we can also do is take a loan. For example, you can take a loan on Aave. You can loan it out on Aave, but that same loan you could also loan out on Euler. You can have that same loan that you could loan out on many different places at the same time. The only danger, if anything happens to one of these components, if anything happens to one of these components, or if it happens at the same time, you could get hit harder, right? Same with slashing. Let's say there's a slashing event on Ethereum and the service that you're restaking to also does slashing. Well, then you lose more money, right? So you increase risks, but you also increase rewards. And then the question is, how do we price these risks? How do we price these rewards, right? And that's where YieldNest comes in. YieldNest will basically take away the complexity of having to think about those difficult risk-reward calculations, and we'll make sure to give you the highest risk-adjusted return. So we will look at, okay, we can get 100% yield there, but that's very dangerous. Let's not do that. We can get 10, 20 there. Okay, let's do that, right? So yeah, I hope that kind of explains that restaking is, to summarize, restaking is not just Eigenlayer, symbiotic kernel Karak. Restaking is actually reusing of productive assets that you use in DeFi in multiple ways. And this could also be loans, this could be assets, this could be liquidity pools, many, many more things.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I have like a great idea. I just looked it up. So let's open like this window here and have a look at the application actually to walk everyone through before we talk about super complex things and so many different opportunities that people can do without having a clear picture here. So so for those of you who are listening to the pod, I would highly recommend tuning in to the YouTube video for that chapter at least. So as you can see, we have like YN ETH, YN BTCK, YN LSDE, and YN BNB. These are like the current assets that are supported. And now we have here, as I can see here, YN ETH.
The best, if you click restake, that button, if you click that in the header, restake, click restake in the top header.
Here?
In the top, in the next to the YieldNest logo. Yeah. See, and then you hover, okay, there you see max RTs, right? So there's basically, as I said, 4 derivative products to make it super easy for everybody to understand. And then with these 4 derivatives, we would go underneath in different LRT strategies, right? So right now, like YieldNest is in flight. We are releasing at the end of this month. We're doing a really big new release before we have our TGE. Our TGE is coming up very, very soon. and we're just kind of revamping and making it simpler for people to understand what's happening here. But it's so again, max LRTs is basically for derivatives, and LRT strategies are the underlying strategies, and there will be a lot, and it will be expanded. The problem that I have with like searching for yield, there's always too many options. So that's why I wanted to keep it simple, 4 options. And then if you want to be a DeFi nerd like me and like Juri and myself here, you could go into the strategies, right? Okay, so YieldNest is actually a native restaking. And what does that mean? Well, this is very close to the metal. So what happens here, if you scroll down a little bit, Juri, you can see yield strategies, right? So here it's basically native ETH, so just naked ETH, this base ETH gets injected into YieldNest. Then we spin up validators, so Ethereum validators. The Ethereum validators, if you scroll down a little bit more, you can actually, you see the validators. There's 172 ETH validators at the moment, and you can transparently check all of them. We also prove all of these validators. And then these validators are restaked into Eigenlayer, right? And then these validators, very close to the metal, are then securing. If you scroll up a little bit to the AVS strategies, you can see there are different categories, right? So currently we are securing interoperability services, rollup services, co-processors, Web3 infra, and other components, right? A cool example of a AVS that we're going to work together with a lot is basically ETH Gas. ETH Gas is not live yet, but they're going to do block space auctioning on Ethereum, and YieldNest will play a big role into that, right? So we are together with ETH Gas going to delegate our native ETH to ETH Gas, and then the validators basically auction off block space, and we promise that we auction off the block space. If we don't auction off the block space, we get slashed. Very simple mechanism, a very good example of good AVS. To be honest, like I just can't say, like a lot of the AVSs that I've seen so far, I'm kind of disappointed with it. The only 2 AVS that I really like, and there's a couple of others, but the ones that I think are really promising is Cap Finance and ETH Gas, and we're both going to work very closely with them to kind of build. YieldNest is going to be focused on a couple of different things, like the ETH Gas or Cap Finance and others. And later you will get more specialized and isolated different categories or basket categories. But that will kind of mostly all happen in the background. And the user will not really see this anymore. But if they want to, they can. And that's also, for me, the philosophy what DeFi should be. DeFi should be this kind of like high-level, simple interface. And then you can go as deep as you want into like all the complexities. And that's what you see here. And what's also cool to note is that YieldNest has different like earning capabilities. So you can see now you can earn around 15% on Spectra Finance. You can earn a little bit of extra yield on Convex. And so you have your around 4 to 5% yield on YieldNest. And then if you want to go a little bit up the risk curve, for example, to provide liquidity to Spectra, Convex, or Curve, you can even earn more.
Yeah, I really love this the statistic here also, because it showcases like the different rewards that you get on the side, so the different boosts. So just that the people understand it right. So if you click here, you basically see, okay, earn up to 19% on your restaked ETH, and these are like the different options that you can offer currently, like either. Yeah.
And this is like you will have to do this yourself, right? And then with our new products, this kind of is all automated. So then it's going to rebalance between Spectra or Convex or other components where there's low risk, and we're like, okay, we can get 7.14% now at Convex. Okay, let's go there. Oh, Spectra gives 30%. Okay, we're going to allocate a little bit more to Spectra. So that rebalancing and that like kind of, where's the highest yield and what is the most capital efficient thing for me to do will happen automatically for you in the background in the future of YieldNest. Yeah.
That's super cool. And also, let's say we would live in such a world already. Would this also mean that you don't put all eggs into one basket, so that you say, okay, the maximum of ETH that we put into one pool, I would say, is, I don't know, 80%, 70%, because I mean, we all have some sort of Terra Luna PST, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I was the guy that called Terra Luna 3 months before it happened. I wrote a whole article about it. So like, I'm pretty good with this like risk analysis stuff, right? And yeah, we will basically constantly monitor all these strategies, as I said in the beginning, with Hyper Native. And if anything is fishy, even if I'm sleeping, or let's say the whole team is sleeping, then even if something weird happens, we will eject from the strategy back to the top level vault, and then we really reassess the different opportunities. Yeah, but this is in an emergency case. Yeah, and it's another example of justification for YieldNest, right? Like these toolings or these configurations are quite complex. I've been in DeFi for a long time, and also the cost, right? The tooling that costs around $40,000, right? So like for any retail user or even a smaller institutional user, that's like too much money to pay. And even the expertise, like yeah, you pay the 40,000, but then it still doesn't work. You still have to configure it, and so it's like it's quite advanced tooling, and I'm very happy that DeFi is now mature enough to deploy it in such a way. Yeah.
Cool. And one last thing with regards to YieldNest is also like the protocol economics that I would like to point out here. So all of the people who use YieldNest at the end of the day, they will receive 90% of the protocol rewards they are basically bringing to the table by using YieldNest. And then you have the YND holders who receive 10% of all of the rewards that get generated. So it's just kind of the logic behind your tokenomics, I assume.
Exactly, right. So we will have a bunch of different, 4 different strategies, 4 different max LRTs, and only a bunch of strategies. And all these strategies earn a certain fee, right? It could be that one very complex strategy would be a bit higher in fee, and maybe one very simple strategy would be a bit lower in fee. So the fees are varied between different strategies underlying. But we will always make sure, like the benchmark yield, if you think about ETH, is like 3-4% now if you just take it, right? So we will always try to get like at least like 10 or 15%. And right now we're even looking at like a high watermark to see like, okay, maybe if we don't get that much yield, we don't take the 10%, right? So there's the things we are exploring, but right now we actually want to keep it as simple as possible and just say 90% goes to user, 10% goes to the YieldNest YND token holders. And over time, we're just going to tweak these ratios and make everything even more efficient. Yeah, but this is the starting point, correct? Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, generally saying, like YieldNest will be like, in your view, the place where people really can bring their ETH to generate a higher yield. Because as of now, if I'm not totally mistaken, if I stake ETH natively right now, I earn my 4%. And with these tools, you can confidently say that you are putting this up a significant notch. So what would be like kind of the rough average ballpark in regards to getting an APY on your ETH asset, assuming that you have the comparison to just natively staking ETH versus to going to YieldNest with a liquid staked ETH token? So where's that kind of the comparison here? How much more yield do I get on YieldNest on average?
So if I dropped the link in the chat to the YieldNest Max LRTs, we have like a landing page for the new Max LRT product range. If you go there, so our current flagship product, YNETH Max, yeah, you can just go, yeah, exactly. And if you scroll a little bit down, you see that this one is 12.5%, a little bit down to, yeah, more down, but sit back while you earn, here, you stop. So you see here, you can see a little bit like an overview of the strategy we're doing. Like, so there's the restaking protocols, it's kind of like the first step, also to secure the other like strategies. And then underneath that, we have a bunch of DeFi strategies and other strategies. Right now, we're testing this kind of like this in-house strategy that we soon will make public. And that earns around 12.5% at the moment for our users, right? So that's a juicy extra yield on top of the juicy extra yield for users. And we actually think we can even boost that more. And we're working hard right now on our new release, and then you will get even more yields. And what's really cool to note, this is a big alpha. We are also launching agentic framework. So we trained a lot of our inference models, of our AI models that are kind of always online, 24/7. Like it's hard to keep up with all the DeFi actions. So we created a YieldNest AI agent that is kind of gonna maintain these strategies. It's not gonna do any transactions just yet. Maybe in the future, when everything, the agents are getting more mature, I do think that 80-90% of DeFi traffic might be AI agents, right? These AI agents will basically constantly feed data and data sets that we are going to read, and our governance forum can read on what are the best strategies, right? So it's not in the way the goal of YieldNest is not to build a strategy that maybe it's not always the best and the highest amount of yield. As I said, always the most risk adjusted yield, right? So let's say the AI bot feeds us data of hey, I see opportunity XYZ. We will examine that with human eyes, and other humans and DAO participants can participate, and then we can propose strategies, and we can inject, and then we can adjust certain ratios, right? It could go even as far as that certain protocols, we, for example, work very closely together with Spectra. Spectra is kind of like a Pendle competitor, and we did this is also not public yet, but we did a DAO to DAO token swap with them. And we're working also very closely with Spectra to do yield trading. So these AI bots, they feed a lot of data into our data feeds, and then we could make a decision do we want to take this new opportunity, or do we want to do we don't want to do that because maybe the risks is too high, right? So that's kind of how we plan to always be ahead of the curve and give people the trust and the reliable protocol metrics that they need.
That's nice. And also really love the factor here that you take into the equation, and what you said in the very beginning is the higher the reward, the higher the risk, and vice versa, right? Basically this whole concept sounds super interesting. And you mentioned also here the different opportunities to max out your LRT APY. So super interesting what's happening over here. We are getting closer to the end of the episode. So maybe some closing remarks, because as mentioned, you have been a part of the Ethereum community for quite some time now. So what's your general gut feeling right now? I mean, when we did our first episode, MakerDAO was super young, Aave was still super young, and now we talk about these fancy yield opportunities where you not only go to protocol, but basically reuse your assets that you have on different protocols, and we can nerd out on different yield opportunities. So how do you generally feel about the Ethereum ecosystem and roadmap right now? Are we on track? What is your feeling? Are you confident about Ethereum's future? Where do you see it going? Do you see it as a global settlement layer? Would really love to pick your brain on this after you haven't been on the show for 4 years, and a lot of things happened in the past 4 years. Exactly.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's a long discussion, I think, but I'm going to try to keep it very short. I am still of the opinion that it's for example, Bitcoin is now also trying to do a lot of DeFi components. I am of the opinion that if I look at Bitcoin DeFi, for example, I'm 7 years ago I worked with RSK, which was almost one of the first kind of Bitcoin layer 2s. I didn't work for the core team, so I worked close with it, and then I saw these Bitcoin layer 2s popping up. And it's kind of the same thing that we saw 7 years ago. And RSK did amazing work. But in order for that to work, we have to do a hard fork in Bitcoin to add new opcodes, right? So that's the first off, right? So then there I think Ethereum made the right trade-offs. I see Ethereum as having Bitcoin-like economic security with like maybe Solana or Sui like kind of like expressiveness and a little bit compute, right? Like Ethereum is not very good at compute. Like Sui or Solana have way better compute and speed. But like if you think about the hardness of data storage, or the hardness of like, hey, I want my network never ever to go down. I want my asset never ever to lose, to always stay in this ledger. Then what is more decentralized, ETH layer 1 or for example Solana or Sui? Well, in this case, if you look at the distribution of the nodes and everything, like Ethereum has that kind of that right trade-off, right? But it is really slow. So now it kind of sacrificed part of its own future roadmap for these layer 2s. That's very confusing for developers like myself, or for builders, or for any user actually. So it's kind of annoying. But these layer 2s, they're competing with the Suis and the Solanas, right? Because these layer 2s, they sync back the state to the layer 1, and then it makes everything much faster, right? So I think that actually that is the endpoint of all blockchains, right? And my opinion is that we will now still call them blockchains, but maybe in the future we will call them proof chains, right? And this is a little bit hard to explain in like 5 to 10 minutes, but I do think once we get to mature ZK proof systems, we will not have to actually sign or do all these complex computations and all these complex calculations of like every node needs to recalculate all the transactions and et cetera, et cetera. What we can do, we still need one layer. We need one layer to hash the data into. And then we can actually generate proof that we did that computation, or can do a lot of different computations and then generate a proof that we send back to a layer 1, or to kind of like a very secure data layer, right? And what is that very secure data layer? Well, I think Ethereum is actually taking the right approach of now using blob space and all that stuff. So Ethereum has that decentralization and has these blob spaces and things where we can start to write our ZK proof data into the blob space, right? Where, for example, something like Solana is completely optimizing for this on-chain blockchain speed, which will kind of become obsolete when ZK proofs will be mature, right? So, but when will that happen? I don't know, right? So it could still be another 10 years before we figure that out. It could be figured out next year, right? So that's why I think the beam chain proposal from Justin Drake that we saw on DEF CON is actually very good, but it doesn't secure or solve the intermediate needs. And that's what layer 2s like Mega ETH, other things can come into the mix. But I do think these layer 1s, yeah, it's still a big debate, right? Like, will we settle all our state to Sui or to Solana? Or is that too centralized? We don't know, right? Will we settle all our state to Bitcoin because actually proof of work is the winner? Maybe. Or are we going to settle all the state to ETH with its like dynamics and the trade-offs that they took, right? So every solution, like Solana, Sui, Bitcoin, ETH, all have their trade-offs and their benefits. I looked at all those trade-offs and benefits quite a lot, and my conclusion is that ETH layer 1 will be the global settlement layer for this kind of proof data, for these proofs. And then ETH layer 1 will also have this, I think, ETH layer 1 assets, the financial layer will also be an ETH layer 1. It's going to be much more expensive to transact, but that's going to be like these big operations, right? And that's why I'm also designing the ETH YNETH max vaults in the way that they settle to ETH layer 1, but still the accounting can be done on different layers, right? And the same thing will be happening with your assets. You can keep your assets on layer 1, and it's going to be a little bit hard to move them away to a different layer 1. But if you then want to do a transaction on layer 2, you can keep your assets on layer 1, and you just sign a proof that, oh, I want to do the computation on Mega ETH. Mega ETH, you do some transactions on Mega ETH, and then at the end of the day, you settle it back to ETH layer 1. And I think that's where it's going to go. And I think ETH is the best like suited long term for that like future.
Yeah, back to like love the way you view this, and basically back to what we have been talking about since 2021: settlement at the end of the day. So all
It's not
tracks.
going to be not blockchains. It's going to be proof chains, I think, in the future.
Yeah, especially for the big guys like Ethereum, eventually also Bitcoin. There's also like following an interesting roadmap here, or like at least the people that innovate in the Bitcoin ecosystem with DeFi opportunities and staking. So
to do that in Bitcoin, you need a hard fork in Bitcoin, right? So will it happen? I don't know. I'm a recovering Bitcoin maxi, so if like I would share it on. Like I still like Bitcoin, but it's old Bitcoin, but like I just don't see a hard fork coming anytime soon. But yeah, let's see.
No, me neither. I just think that these Bitcoin staking protocols could basically take advantage of that and basically try to.
Oh no, doesn't work.
I mean, technically maybe, but maybe people will feel comfortable on doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it will pump, or maybe you will see some value temporarily, but then like I'm looking at like a 10-year horizon, and if they don't hard fork, then those things will die off, right? But yeah, it could definitely pump. Yeah. But that's my opinion. It's my opinion. It's not a fact. It's just my opinion.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Lastly, how would you respond to the question, what would success for YieldNest look like on a time horizon, let's say 2 to 3 years? What would be like a successful outcome of what you're building?
Yes. So my successful outcome is that I was making this analogy, like when we pay each other with this weird thing called fiat or USD or euro or whatever you use, right? Thai baht, whatever. But these assets we pay each other with are assets that depreciate in value. So if I pay you in USD, I basically give you some shit, right? So it's like stuff that is basically ice that's melting, right? I pay you in something, if you just hold it, goes away, right? Because like we have around a 10 to 15% inflation rate nowadays. It's insane. So where I see it going is that we build these base yielding assets, and I hope to live in a future where people are educated enough of like, hey, I want my assets to be productive, and that people start to pay each other maybe in Y and ETH max. That's going to be like, instead of paying yourself in US dollar, I pay you in this saving asset. I actually, when I do payments, I mostly pay people until Y and USD X comes out, of course. But right now, I pay a lot of people in USDC, because if I pay you in USDC, you directly generate like 5 to 10% yield on your stable coins, right? Instead of giving you just a USDC thing, right?
Yeah.
So I hope to see a future where YieldNest assets can become core assets in a global, decentralized, self-sovereign financial system, and the YieldNest protocol is a hardened protocol with agentic agents where people can come to get the maximum amount of yields, or give their assets maybe to some sort of an AI bot that automatically starts to rebalance between different pockets of like ETH, stablecoin, SUI, Solana, whatever. I hope to see a future where we can become self-sovereign entities of our own future and still have control and yes.
Yeah, very interesting way to look at this. Totally echoing this. We're getting closer to the hour. So last question for today. So where can people follow the journey or like the vision you guys follow and become part of your community?
Perfect. Yeah, make sure to go to yieldnest.finance. Go to yieldnest.finance on Twitter, yieldnestfi, and follow myself, Amadeo, at Amadeo Brands. Easy, it's there in the title here, or YieldNest. If you search it on Twitter or even on Google, probably you'll find us. But watch out for any weird links. Always, it's yieldnest.finance. Don't click the wrong links. And be sure to keep a lookout. We're going to do our TGE very soon. Reason for that is because I feel the market in February is going to be very, very attractive. And the goal is to do beginning of March, end of February, to have our token generation event and give our the YieldNest DAO token, distributed YieldNest DAO token to as many people as possible, get as many smart brains as possible into our community, and talk about DeFi strategies, self-sovereign money layers, and let's build the future of decentralized finance together. And I'm very excited and pumped to have all of you join and build a better future together.
Yeah, very nice words toward the end of this interview. Amadeo, thank you so much for joining after all of these years. Pleasure as always, and was very interesting to learn more about YieldNest, and all the best of luck for your TGE event. And with that being said, hope to see you soon on the show.
Yes, see you soon. Thank you so much, Juri. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Bye, guys.